The room was large, with high ceilings and walls that shimmered faintly under the soft glow of alien lights. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with beings from across the stars, each representing their own species or civilization. They sat in curved rows, their forms ranging from tall and slender to short and stout, some covered in scales, others in fur, and a few appearing almost mechanical. Among them, two humans stood at the center of attention. Daniel Carter, a man in his early 40s with sharp features and calm eyes, held a tablet displaying the blueprints of Earth's newest fleet of starships. Beside him stood Rachel Monroe, a woman with an air of quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. The atmosphere was tense. The Galactic Council had called this meeting to review Earth's contributions to interstellar diplomacy. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only a few decades, and many older species viewed humans as inexperienced newcomers. This session was meant to showcase what Earth had achieved since joining the Council, but it quickly turned sour when Daniel began his presentation. "These are the designs for our latest starships," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the weight of dozens of alien gazes fixed on him. He tapped the tablet, and a holographic projection of the ships appeared above the podium. The vessels were sturdy, built to withstand long journeys through deep space. Their shapes were practical rather than sleek, with reinforced hulls and modular components designed for adaptability. To human eyes, they represented innovation born out of necessity. But to the council members, they looked clumsy and outdated. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Ambassador Lyrak, a towering reptilian creature with emerald green skin, leaned forward in his seat. "Primitive," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Your ships lack elegance, speed, and any real tactical sophistication." His words drew nods and murmurs of agreement from other delegates. Rachel clenched her jaw but kept her expression neutral. She had expected skepticism, even criticism, but the outright mockery stung more than she cared to admit. Still, she reminded herself why they were here. Humanity needed allies, not enemies, and proving themselves worthy required patience. Daniel took a step forward, addressing the crowd directly. "These ships may not look advanced compared to yours, but they carry something unique: ingenuity, born of necessity. We don't have access to the same resources as many of your civilizations. What we do have is determination and creativity." His response earned a few raised eyebrows but little sympathy. Another delegate, a small amphibian-like being with translucent skin, chimed in. "Determination and creativity won't save you if your ships can't keep up. How do you expect to contribute meaningfully to galactic efforts when your technology lags so far behind?" Rachel finally spoke up, her tone measured but firm. "Our ships may not match yours in appearance, but they're reliable and efficient. They've already completed several successful missions exploring uncharted regions of space. And let's not forget, humanity has made significant strides in a very short time." Her words fell flat. More laughter erupted, louder this time. Some delegates exchanged amused glances, while others openly mocked the human representatives. One ambassador, a bird-like creature with iridescent feathers, flapped its wings dramatically. "Perhaps you should stick to staying on your own planet," it suggested, earning cheers from nearby seats. Daniel forced himself to remain calm. He knew better than to let frustration show. Instead, he glanced at Rachel, who gave him a subtle nod. They had rehearsed for moments like this, knowing full well how dismissive the council might be. Now was the time to plant a seed of curiosity, however small. "Before you dismiss us entirely," Daniel continued, raising his voice slightly to cut through the noise, "consider this. These ships aren't just tools for exploration, they're platforms for collaboration. We're willing to share our knowledge, our methods, and our discoveries with anyone interested in working together. Isn't that what this council is supposed to represent? Cooperation among species?" For a brief moment, the laughter subsided. A few delegates exchanged thoughtful looks, though most remained unconvinced. Ambassador Lyrak tilted his head, studying Daniel with narrowed eyes. "Collaboration sounds noble," he said slowly, "but it means little without results. Prove yourselves first, then we'll talk about partnerships." With that, The session concluded. The council members filed out of the chamber, chatting amongst themselves and occasionally casting smug glances toward the humans. Daniel and Rachel stayed behind, watching as the room emptied. Neither spoke immediately, both processing the weight of what had just happened. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "Well, that could have gone better," she said dryly. Daniel managed a faint smile. "It could have been worse. At least no one threw anything at us." Rachel chuckled despite herself. "True, but we're going to need more than clever comebacks if we want to earn their respect." "You're right," Daniel agreed. "We'll find a way. Humanity's survival depends on it." As they left the chamber, neither noticed the faint hum of energy emanating from one corner of the room. Unseen by anyone, a tiny device embedded in the wall recorded every word spoken during the session. It wasn't part of the official council equipment. It belonged to someone else entirely, someone who had been observing the proceedings with great interest. Back on Earth, news of the council's reaction spread quickly. Public opinion wavered between outrage and determination. Some argued that humanity shouldn't bother trying to impress such arrogant beings, while others believed persistence would eventually pay off. For Daniel and Rachel, there was no question. They had faced adversity before, both personally and professionally, and they knew how to push through it. Little did they realize, however, that the council's mockery would soon pale in comparison to the challenges ahead. Across the galaxy, strange events were unfolding, events that would force everyone, humans and aliens alike, to reconsider everything they thought they knew about power, progress, and survival. Weeks passed after the humiliating session at the Galactic Council. Back on Earth, Daniel Carter and Rachel Monroe tried to focus on their work, but the sting of mockery lingered. The Council's laughter echoed in their minds whenever they reviewed the designs for humanity's starships. Still, they refused to let it break their resolve. If anything, the criticism fueled their determination to prove that Earth had something valuable to offer. Meanwhile, unsettling news began filtering in from across the galaxy. At first, it was just whispers, rumors of ships disappearing without explanation. Then came official reports. A small trade vessel belonging to the Varnock species vanished near the edge of known space. Its last transmission mentioned nothing unusual, only static followed by silence. Days later, an entire squadron of Zorvath warships disappeared during a routine patrol. Panic spread quickly among the galactic community. The disappearances weren't random. They happened along routes where human ships had recently traveled. This pattern didn't go unnoticed by Earth's orbital command station, where Daniel and Rachel monitored communications. One evening, as they sifted through data, Rachel noticed something odd. She pulled up maps showing the locations of the missing ships and overlaid them with the flight paths of recent human missions. "Look at this," she said, pointing to her screen. "Every disappearance occurred within days of our ships passing through these areas." Daniel leaned closer, studying the patterns. "You think there's a connection?" "I don't know yet," Rachel admitted, "but it's too much of a coincidence to ignore. Let me run some simulations." She spent hours analyzing gravitational readings and energy signatures from the affected regions. What she found sent chills down her spine. There were anomalies, strange fluctuations in gravity and electromagnetic fields that suggested interference from unknown forces. It was as if something was manipulating space itself. "It's almost like someone or something is creating barriers," Rachel murmured, showing her findings to Daniel. "These anomalies could explain why the ships vanished, but what's causing them? And why are they targeting areas we've been to?" Daniel frowned, his mind racing. If the disappearances were linked to human activity, Earth could become a target for blame and retaliation. The Galactic Council might see it as proof that humanity was reckless or even dangerous. He knew they needed answers before things spiraled out of control. "We need to investigate," Daniel said firmly. "Send one of our ships to the most recent site and see what's going on." Rachel hesitated. "It's risky. Whatever's out there could be hostile, or worse. That's why I'm coming with you," Daniel replied. "And you're coming too. Your expertise will be crucial." After some debate, Their superiors reluctantly approved the mission. The Eclipse, one of the mocked human ships, was chosen for the task. Its crew included Captain Laura Bennett, a seasoned astronaut known for her calm under pressure, and Ethan Brooks, a young engineer fascinated by experimental technology. Together, they prepared for the journey into the unknown. As the Eclipse left Earth's orbit, the mood aboard the ship was tense. The crew exchanged nervous glances but remained focused on their mission. For days, they traveled through the vast emptiness of space, guided by Rachel's calculations. Finally, they reached the coordinates of the latest disappearance, an area marked by swirling clouds of cosmic dust. "This doesn't look right," Laura said, peering at the view screen. The stars ahead seemed distorted, their light bending unnaturally. Instruments on board began behaving erratically, flickering and emitting strange noises. "Gravitational readings are off the charts," Ethan reported, adjusting controls frantically. "Something's interfering with our systems." Before anyone could react, the ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared as the Eclipse was pulled into a vortex of swirling colors and shifting lights. When the turbulence subsided, the crew found themselves in an unfamiliar void, a vast expanse unlike anything they'd ever seen. What is this place?" Ethan whispered, staring wide-eyed at the view screen. Rachel studied the readings carefully. "It's not empty space," she said slowly. "This is a pocket dimension, artificially created. Something, or someone, is controlling it." As if on cue, a massive structure emerged from the chaos. It was a colossal sphere covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with energy. The surface shimmered and shifted, giving the impression of life. It loomed over the Eclipse, dwarfing the human ship. "Is that alive?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, a beam of light enveloped the Eclipse, lifting it effortlessly toward the sphere. The crew braced themselves as the ship entered the structure, passing through layers of glowing membranes that felt both solid and ethereal. Inside, they found themselves in a chamber filled with floating platforms and streams of radiant energy. Standing, or rather hovering before them, were beings unlike anything they'd ever encountered. These entities were made purely of energy, their forms constantly shifting between shapes and colors. They communicated telepathically, their voices resonating in the minds of the crew. "You have entered our domain," one of the beings said. "We are the guardians of cosmic balance." Daniel stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you? Why have you brought us here?" The guardian tilted its form, resembling a gesture of curiosity. "We observe all civilizations, ensuring harmony among the stars. Your kind has drawn our attention." Rachel spoke next, her voice steady despite the surreal situation. "What do you mean?" "How have we drawn your attention?" The guardian gestured, and images appeared in the air around them. Scenes of Earth flashed before their eyes, humans building cities, exploring space, overcoming challenges. "Your species demonstrates resilience and adaptability," the guardian explained. "Others flaunt power and technology, yet lack wisdom. You create solutions despite limitations, showing potential for growth." Laura glanced at Daniel, unsure whether to feel proud or wary. "Why bring us here now?" she asked. "To warn you," the guardian replied. "Imbalance grows among the stars. Some seek domination, threatening the fabric of existence. We isolate such threats to preserve order." Daniel's eyes widened. "The disappearances, they're your doing." "Yes. Those who disrupt balance must be removed. Yet your presence complicates matters. Your ships carry traces of energy tied to this realm, attracting unwanted attention." Rachel frowned. "So others think we're responsible for the disappearances?" The guardian nodded. "Misunderstandings arise. You must act wisely to avoid conflict." Ethan raised his hand hesitantly. "What should we do?" "Learn," the guardian said simply. "Understand your role in the cosmos. Balance requires cooperation, not division. Humanity holds untapped potential. Use it wisely." With that, the chamber began to dissolve around them. The eclipse reappeared outside the sphere, back in normal space. The crew sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just experienced. "Well," Laura said finally, breaking the quiet. "That was unexpected." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We've been given a chance to change how the galaxy sees us, but it won't be easy." Rachel smiled faintly. "Nothing worth doing ever is." As the eclipse turned toward Earth, the crew knew their journey was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, with courage, ingenuity, and hope. The eclipse hummed softly as it made its way back to Earth, carrying a crew burdened with knowledge far beyond their expectations. The journey home was quiet, the kind of silence that settles when people are lost in thought. Each member of the EI crew replayed the encounter with the Guardians in their minds, trying to make sense of what they had seen and heard. For Daniel Carter and Rachel Monroe, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. When the ship finally docked at Earth's orbital station, the crew wasted no time preparing their report. They gathered in a secure conference room, surrounded by walls lined with screens displaying maps, data, and images of the mysterious sphere. The air smelled faintly of recycled oxygen, a constant reminder of how fragile life in space truly was. Daniel stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on a stack of notes. "We need to tell them everything," he began, looking around at the others. "Not just about the disappearances, but about the Guardians and their message." Rachel nodded in agreement. "If we don't explain this properly, Earth could become a scapegoat for the Council. They'll blame us for something we didn't do." Captain Laura Bennett crossed her arms, her face serious. "They might not believe us. Talking about energy beings and pocket dimensions sounds, well, crazy." "It does," Ethan Brooks chimed in, adjusting his glasses nervously. "But we have proof. The readings, the footage from inside the sphere. That has to count for something." Daniel sighed. He knew they were right. Convincing skeptical leaders, let alone the Galactic Council, wouldn't be easy. Still, they had no choice but to try. Humanity's future depended on it. The next day, Daniel and Rachel presented their findings to Earth's top officials. The meeting took place in a high-security briefing room deep beneath the surface of the planet. The walls were bare except for a large screen at one end, where holographic projections of the sphere and its guardians flickered to life. Around the table sat generals, scientists, and politicians, all wearing expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disbelief. Rachel started the presentation, explaining the anomalies detected near the disappearance sites. She showed charts and graphs detailing the gravitational distortions and electromagnetic interference. Her voice remained calm, even as murmurs of skepticism rippled through the room. "This isn't natural," she said firmly. "Something or someone is manipulating space itself, and it's connected to those missing ships." Next, Daniel took over, recounting their encounter with the Guardians. He described the massive sphere, the glowing patterns, and the beings, made of pure energy. When he mentioned the telepathic communication, several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "These entities call themselves Guardians," Daniel continued. "They monitor civilizations across the galaxy, ensuring balance. They told us the disappearances are their way of isolating threats to cosmic harmony." One of the generals leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You're saying these Guardians are kidnapping ships just like that?" "They're removing threats," Rachel clarified. "Species that prioritize domination over cooperation are being isolated. It's not random, it's calculated." A scientist raised her hand cautiously. "But why involve humans? Why bring you into this?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Because we're different. We adapt, innovate, and find solutions despite our limitations. The Guardians see potential in us. They want us to help restore balance." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Finally, one of the politicians spoke up. "So, what do we do now? How do we convince the rest of the galaxy that this isn't our fault?" "We go back to the Galactic Council," Daniel replied. "We present the evidence and explain what happened. If we can show them the truth, maybe they'll stop pointing fingers at us. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was all they had." After hours of discussion, the decision was made. Earth would reach out to the Council and request an emergency session. In the meantime, preparations began to gather every piece of evidence they could: sensor logs, video footage, and detailed accounts from the crew. Days later, Daniel and Rachel found themselves standing once again in the Galactic Council chamber. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. News of the ongoing disappearances had spread and tension filled the air. Delegates whispered among themselves, casting wary glances at the humans. Ambassador Lyrak, the reptilian Zorvath who had mocked them before, looked particularly uneasy. When the session began, Daniel stepped forward holding a datapad containing their evidence. "Honorable members of the Council," he began, his voice steady. "We come before you today not to defend ourselves, but to share critical information regarding the recent disappearances." He proceeded to outline their discovery of the anomalies, showing holographic projections of the distorted star fields in the massive sphere. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the image of the Guardians appeared, a swirling mass of light and color unlike anything most delegates had ever seen. "These beings exist outside our understanding of physics," Rachel added. "They act as custodians of cosmic order, intervening when necessary to maintain balance." Ambassador Lyrak rose from his seat, his tail flicking irritably. "And you expect us to believe this? That some ethereal entities are responsible for abducting ships?" "Yes," Daniel replied without hesitation, "because it's the truth. Our ships were never the cause, they were merely markers. The Guardians noticed traces of energy tied to humanity's vessels which drew their attention. But we aren't the ones creating the disturbances." To emphasize their point, Rachel played footage from inside the sphere. The Council watched, in stunned silence as the Guardians communicated telepathically, explaining their role and warning of growing imbalance. When the video ended, the room was eerily quiet. Finally, a delegate from the amphibian Varnock species spoke. "Even if this is true, what does it mean for us? Are we supposed to sit idly by while our ships vanish?" "No," Rachel answered. "The Guardians gave us a message. Balance requires cooperation, not division. Humanity is willing to work with any species ready to embrace peace and collaboration. Together we can prevent further conflict." Her words hung in the air, met with a mix of skepticism and cautious optimism. Some delegates exchanged thoughtful looks, while others remained guarded. Ambassador Lyrak, however, seemed less hostile than before. He studied the humans carefully, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said after a long pause. "Let us consider your claims. But know this: if you're lying, there will be consequences." Daniel nodded, relieved that they hadn't been dismissed outright. "Thank you. All we ask is a chance to prove ourselves." As the session concluded, Rachel turned to Daniel, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and hope. "Do you think they'll listen?" "I think we've planted a seed," he replied. "Whether it grows or withers depends on what happens next." Back on Earth, news of the presentation spread quickly. Public opinion shifted slightly, with many people rallying behind the idea of unity and cooperation. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether trusting alien forces was wise. Despite the mixed reactions, Daniel and Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced ridicule, danger, and doubt, but they had also uncovered a truth that could change the galaxy forever. Little did they realize their actions had already set something in motion. Across the stars, whispers of humanity's boldness reached ears eager to test their resolve. Challenges lay ahead, but so did opportunities. And for the first time, Earth stood poised to step out of the shadows and take its place among the stars, not as followers, but as leaders. The days following the Galactic Council session were tense but hopeful. Daniel Carter and Rachel Monroe had returned to Earth, their minds racing with possibilities. They knew the Council's reaction wasn't a full endorsement, but it was a start. A crack in the wall of skepticism that had long surrounded humanity. Delegates from various species had begun reaching out, asking questions about the Guardians and the mysterious sphere. Some were curious, others cautious, but all shared one thing: a growing awareness that humanity might hold answers they desperately needed. Back at Earth's orbital command station, preparations were underway for a new phase of diplomacy. The Eclipse's crew had been hailed as heroes, though they didn't feel like it. Captain Laura Bennett spent hours reviewing logs and data, searching for anything they might have missed during their encounter. Ethan Brooks, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to adapt Earth's technology based on what they'd learned from the Guardians. If humanity was going to play a role in restoring cosmic balance, they needed tools capable of bridging gaps between civilizations. Daniel and Rachel, however, focused on outreach. They drafted messages to key members of the Galactic Council, inviting them to collaborate. These messages weren't demands or boasts. They were humble offers to share knowledge and work together. It was a risky move. Many species still viewed humans as inexperienced and untrustworthy. But Daniel believed humility would speak louder than pride. One afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at the orbital station. Ambassador Lyrak, the Zorvath who had once mocked Earth starships, requested a private meeting. His presence alone sent ripples through the station. Crew members whispered among themselves, unsure whether his visit was a threat or an opportunity. When Lyrak entered the conference room, his towering frame cast a shadow over the table. His emerald green scales shimmered faintly under the artificial lights, and his sharp eyes scanned the room before settling on Daniel and Rachel. For a moment, no one spoke. "You've caused quite a stir," Lyrak said finally, his voice low and measured. "Your claims about these Guardians have divided opinion among my people." Rachel nodded, keeping her tone neutral. "We understand skepticism. What we shared isn't easy to accept." Lyrak tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity or impatience. "I came here because I wanted to see your evidence firsthand. My superiors are hesitant, but I believe there's value in exploring every possibility." Daniel gestured toward a nearby screen, where holographic projections of the sphere and its guardians flickered to life. "This is everything we recorded during our encounter," he explained. "The anomalies, the disappearances, the guardians, message, it's all here." As Lyrak reviewed the footage, his expression shifted subtly. The glowing patterns of the sphere, the shifting forms of the guardians, and their telepathic warnings left even him visibly unsettled. When the video ended, he remained silent for several moments. "This changes things," he admitted reluctantly. "If what you say is true, then the galaxy faces a challenge unlike any we've encountered before." "It does," Rachel agreed. "But it's also an opportunity. The Guardians told us that balance requires cooperation. Humanity wants to help build that future." Lyrak studied her carefully, his gaze piercing. "Why should we trust you? You're newcomers, untested compared to older civilizations." "Because we know what it's like to be underestimated," Daniel replied firmly. "We've faced challenges, made mistakes, and learned from them. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we're willing to listen and work alongside others." For the first time, Lyrak's stern demeanor softened. He nodded slowly as if weighing their words. "Very well. I'll present this evidence to my leaders. Whether they act on it remains to be seen." Though his response wasn't a guarantee, it was progress. As Lyrak departed, Daniel and Rachel exchanged relieved smiles. They hadn't won him over completely, but they'd planted another seed. Every step forward mattered. In the weeks that followed, more delegates approached Earth with questions and proposals. Some sought technical assistance, hoping to adapt human designs for their own ships. Others asked for strategies to navigate regions affected by the anomalies. Humanity's reputation began to shift, not entirely, but enough to open doors that had once been firmly closed. One evening, as Daniel reviewed updates from various missions, Rachel joined him in the observation deck. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly beyond the window, dotted with stars and distant galaxies. She leaned against the railing, her arms crossed. "We're doing something right," she said softly. "People are listening." Daniel glanced at her, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "For now at least, but we can't afford to rest. The Guardians warned us about imbalance. Until we address that, nothing's truly resolved." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Do you think we can actually make a difference? I think we have to, Daniel replied. If we don't try, who will? Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert flashing on Daniel's wrist communicator. He tapped it, connecting to the station's command center. A young officer appeared on the small screen, her face pale with concern. Sir, we've detected unusual activity near the edge of known space, she reported. Multiple ships from different species are converging on a single location. It looks like they're heading toward one of the anomaly zones. Rachel frowned. What could they be doing? Daniel's jaw tightened. It doesn't sound good. Gather the crew. We need to investigate. The Eclipse launched within the hour, its engines roaring as it sped toward the disturbance. Along the way, they intercepted fragmented transmissions from the approaching ships. Most were garbled, but one message came through clearly. Eliminate the threat. That doesn't sound like cooperation, Laura muttered grimly as she piloted the ship. When they reached the coordinates, the scene was chaotic. Dozens of vessels, some sleek and advanced, others bulky and outdated, circled the area where the anomalies had been detected. Weapons charged, shields activated, and tension crackled in the air like static electricity. What are they doing? Ethan asked nervously, staring at the view screen. They think destroying the source of the anomalies will solve their problems, Rachel guessed. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. Before anyone could respond, a massive energy surge erupted from the anomaly zone. The swirling vortex expanded rapidly, engulfing nearby ships and pulling them inside. Panic spread as captains scrambled to retreat, but it was too late for some. Within minutes, half the fleet had vanished. Laura gripped the controls tightly. We need to warn them. They're making it worse. Daniel stepped forward, addressing the other ships via comms. This is Commander Daniel Carter of the Eclipse. Cease your attack immediately. You're provoking the Guardians, not solving the problem. His plea went unanswered. Instead, a hostile voice crackled over the channel. Stay out of this, human. This is none of your concern. Rachel clenched her fists. If they keep going, everyone here is in danger. Daniel turned to Laura. Take us closer. We need to show them the truth. As the Eclipse moved into position, the vortex pulsed violently, threatening to consume them as well. Just as chaos seemed inevitable, a familiar beam of light enveloped the ship, pulling it safely inside. Once again, the crew found themselves face to face with the Guardians. We warned you, one of the beings said, its voice resonating in their minds. Conflict breeds imbalance. Will you continue down this path? Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding. No, we'll stop them. Give us a chance to prove it. The Guardian hesitated, then nodded. You have little time. Act wisely. With that, the Eclipse re-emerged outside the sphere, now surrounded by stunned survivors of the earlier attack. Slowly, deliberately, Daniel broadcast a message to all. Ships. The Guardians aren't your enemy, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. They're trying to protect us. If we work together, we can restore balance. But if we fight, we'll destroy ourselves. Silence followed. His words. Then, one by one, the ships powered down their weapons. Hope flickered faintly, fragile but alive. The standoff near the anomaly zone ended not with violence, but with a fragile truce. The captains of the gathered ships, shaken by what they had witnessed, agreed to retreat and regroup. Some were still skeptical of humanity's claims about the Guardians, while others seemed willing to listen. For Daniel Carter and Rachel Monroe, this was both a victory and a challenge. They had prevented immediate disaster, but the galaxy wasn't out of danger yet. Back on Earth, news of the incident spread quickly. Public opinion shifted further in favor of cooperation, with many people praising the crew of the Eclipse for their bravery and diplomacy. Leaders from across the globe held emergency meetings to discuss next steps. It was clear that humanity needed to take a leading role if they hoped to unite the fractured galactic community. Daniel and Rachel spent hours preparing for another address to the Galactic Council. This time, their goal wasn't just to explain the truth. It was to propose a plan that would bring species together, foster understanding, and prevent future conflicts. They knew it wouldn't be easy. Old prejudices ran deep and trust was hard to earn, but they also knew they couldn't give up. When the council chamber convened once again, the atmosphere was different. Delegates who had once mocked humanity now watched Daniel and Rachel with cautious respect. Ambassador Lyrak, seated among his peers, gave them a subtle nod, a small gesture, but one that carried weight. "Honorable members of the council," Daniel began, his voice calm but firm. "We stand before you today not as victims or aggressors, but as partners. Together, we've seen the cost of division and misunderstanding. Now is the time to choose a better path." Rachel stepped forward, holding up a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Guardians showed us that balance requires cooperation. They didn't isolate certain species out of malice. They acted to protect the cosmos from imbalance. If we want to avoid more disappearances, we need to work together." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Humanity proposes
forming a coalition, a group of representatives from every species willing to collaborate. This coalition will focus on 3 goals: sharing knowledge, addressing resource shortages, and resolving disputes peacefully."
Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates exchanged hopeful glances while others remained guarded. A bird-like ambassador flapped its wings impatiently. "And how do you expect us to trust each other? Many of our species have been rivals for centuries." "That's why we start small," Rachel replied. "By working on shared projects like improving ship designs or mapping safe travel routes, we can build trust over time. Humanity is ready to share everything we've learned so far." Ambassador Lyrak rose from his seat, drawing everyone's attention. "It's a bold idea," he said, his tone thoughtful. "But boldness is sometimes necessary. My people are willing to join this coalition, if others agree." His statement sparked a wave of discussion. Slowly, hesitantly, other delegates voiced their support. Not everyone was convinced, but enough agreed to move forward. By the end of the session, the foundation for the coalition had been laid. In Mauizain, the months that followed, humanity became a beacon of hope. Earth hosted conferences where scientists, engineers, and diplomats from various species gathered to exchange ideas. The Eclipse served as a mobile hub, traveling between worlds to facilitate communication and collaboration. Its crew worked tirelessly, often facing challenges but never losing sight of their mission. One breakthrough came when Ethan Brooks developed a new type of energy converter based on principles observed during their encounter with the Guardians. This device allowed ships to navigate anomaly zones safely, reducing fear and mistrust among travelers. Another success was the creation of joint research stations near contested territories, where rival species could work side by side under neutral supervision. Captain Laura Bennett took pride in watching these efforts unfold. "It's not perfect," she admitted to Daniel one evening, "but it's progress." He smiled faintly. "Progress is all we can ask for right now." Rachel nodded in agreement. "Every step forward brings us closer to balance. That's what the Guardians wanted, to see us try." Word of humanity's leadership reached even the most isolated corners of the galaxy. Species that had once dismissed Earth as insignificant now looked to it for guidance. The once mocked human ships proved invaluable, not because of their speed or firepower, but because of their adaptability and resilience. Their design flaws, which had drawn ridicule in the past, inspired innovations that benefited everyone. As the coalition grew stronger, so did humanity's standing in the galactic community. At a grand ceremony celebrating the coalition's achievements, Ambassador Lyrak approached Daniel and Rachel. His expression was solemn, but there was warmth in his eyes. "You've earned my respect," he said simply. "Perhaps we misjudged your kind too quickly." Daniel shook his hand, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. "Appearances can be deceiving, for ships and for species." Lyrak chuckled softly. "Indeed. Let us hope this unity lasts." It wasn't a guarantee, of course. Challenges lay ahead, and not every species would embrace peace willingly. But, for the first time in history, the galaxy had a chance to rewrite its story, one built on cooperation rather than conflict. Years later, historians would look back on this era as a turning point. Humanity had risen not through conquest or arrogance, but through empathy and determination. The galaxy learned that true strength lies not in power, but in unity. And Earth stood as living proof of that timeless truth. Far beyond the stars, the Guardians watched silently, their glowing forms shimmering with approval. Balance had been restored for now.